Kandahar Giant Chapter 4. The first contact of a giant red-haired creature with 6 fingers, a private lost his life when the giant threw a spear completely through the man's body and killing him. The other soldiers gunned down the monster, killing the giant, and removing his body for further investigation. This is the second mission searching for more of these creatures. Continuing from Chapter 3, Chase thought it was all like a dream because it was. A canister of gas was accidentally released in the cave and knocked out everyone. Chase woke up with his face halfway in water on the cave floor. He could feel small water insects swimming and darting off his face. He sat up and could vaguely see the others sitting trying to get themselves together too. He drank from his canteen and washed his face off. He looked around to see they were all still in the cave. Someone must have popped their gas canister, he thought. That was a poor time to make a mistake. He stood at the same time as Major Dalton, who was beside him. The Major woke up cursing, as did half of the people there. A few soldiers threw up. The gas could be nauseating. As well as a few people soiled themselves. Chase recalled his dream. There was no valley of red hair people, no giants, and no beautiful red hair women. But then he wondered, was it real and this is where they placed us after? I had the most amazing dream. The Major spoke out. Were there giants and beautiful red hair women? Chase asked. Chase was the CIA operator that was there as an observer. No, said the Major. So, it was a dream. Chase pondered. Everyone, check your gas canisters. The Major ordered. He walked down the line and shined a flashlight on the soldiers looking for an open canister of gas. He stopped where a soldier was still sleeping. This is the discharged canister. Embarrassing. Major Dalton shook his head. Just embarrassing. He repeated. Punishment would have to come later. They still had a mission to complete. While Chase was dreaming of giant red-haired women, we could have all been killed in our sleep. With all these caverns, said Dalton, an angry giant could suddenly appear from any one of them. The soldier that popped the sleeping gas began to stir. Jennings and Taylor, escort this man to the cave entrance before there are any more accidents. Then, Major Dalton shouted, everyone take some water and let's get back to the mission at hand. So much for the element of surprise. Chase mumbled just loud enough for no one to hear. Chase looked up to the light streaming in from a hole in the cave's ceiling. What he didn't see were bones like at the cave's entrance. Perhaps they were placed there as a warning not to enter. His thoughts went back to the giant they killed. He had 6 fingers just like the Nephilim giants of the Bible. That can't be a coincidence. He wondered how old the giant could have been before he was cut down by the soldiers. The medical team back at the CIA said from the bone and fingernail samples, the monster could be hundreds of years old. Perhaps older. The Bible says that all the Nephilims died in the Great Flood, but in other chapters it talks about David and Goliath's 4 brothers from the Nephilim. There is still a possibility that aliens might be involved. Chase thought and smiled to himself. No, there's not. He is always hoping for aliens and yet there never is. Chase shined his light out in front of him and was shocked to see what looked like a very large child laid out on the ground unconscious. He also had 6 fingers. Dalton, he whispered. Check this out. Major Dalton hurried over, at first hesitated when he saw the giant's child, then kneeled down and checked his pulse. He's alive. They quickly bound the child and hurried him out of the cave. A chopper was called in and quickly took the boy away. As the chopper shrank in the distance, an order came across to continue searching the cave for more people things. Chase heard the orders, made a weird face, and motioned with his head, let's go back in. You know, the Major said, there could be a very angry giant mother inside waiting to tear our limbs off. I'm aware. Chase nodded. This time you go first. They immediately bound the child and hurried him out of the cave. A chopper was called in and quickly took the boy away. As the chopper shrank in the distance, an order came across to continue searching the cave for more people things. Chase heard the orders, made a weird face, and motioned with his head, let's go back in. You know, the Major said, There could be a very angry giant mother inside waiting to tear our limbs off? I'm aware. Chase nodded. This time you go first. The soldier specialists began mapping out the cave. Many of the passageways returned to the main throughway. They found a living area and eating area and a place where they relieved themselves. So far there were no more giant people things. This is the name Chase gave them. People things. Inside the cavern was cool and clammy. A drastic change from the outside. Chase and Dalton sat against a rock formation and waited for the specialist to finish mapping the cave. That kid was something. Dalton commented. Your first giant? Chase asked in a joking manner. There must be a female. It didn't hatch from a dormant egg, said Dalton. Chase lifted his face mask and said, I'm not sure taking them away from here is a good thing. We are exposing them, or at least the kid, to germs that could kill him. The world has become a smaller place, replied Dalton. They can't hide from us forever. Put your mask back on. I don't want to capture the next giant alone. Dalton spoke into his mic. How much longer? Not sure, Major, a voice responded. Carry on then, Dalton returned. He then looked at Chase and said, let's follow this pass to see what's down there. I thought you would never ask, replied Chase. Chase removed his super-duper flashlight that he bought from the internet and turned it on. The entire cave was illuminated. Along the walls of the cave were drawings of trees, animals, and other objects that you don't see in Afghanistan. Perhaps there was a time when these creatures roamed the land, that was not a desert wasteland, like it is today. This cave must have been inhabited off and on for thousands of years. There are woolly mammoth drawings, cave bears and tigers. Chase and Dalton stopped to take photos of the walls. From another time. Chase muttered, then pointed out a scene on the wall that looked like a boat in a flood. That could be Noah's Ark? Maybe, answered Dalton. Could also be the flood when these giants urinated. Both men laughed, stopped, and began laughing again. As in his dream, Chase saw light beaming in from the end of the passage they were on. Look it, he said. I saw it, said Dalton. The two men walked carefully, trying to not trip on the uneven path until they stumbled out of the cave into daylight. The land wasn't much better than the arid desert at the entrance, but in the distance the two men could see green tips of trees and they could hear a stream of rushing water. The dirt path before them was thin like an animal trail. There were donkey hoofs prints, and goat tracks. It was clear the cave was a passage between two valleys. Should we continue on? Chase asked. Sure. In the worst case scenario, we can pop these gas canisters and sleep through our deaths. I have a feeling we shouldn't have taken that kid so quickly, commented Chase. The giant in the cave has been legend in the area for over 1,000 years or more. They were thought to be from before the flood. Already the mission has gone beyond finding archaeological remains. They've already recovered the body of an adult male, and a live giant child. If there are a man and child, it is possible a woman that gave birth to the child may be somewhere around. Although, from the size of the kid's head, they wondered what type of women could survive childbirth. The mission notes were as follows. 1. Red-haired giants. The primary inhabitants of the valley would be the giants themselves, described as towering figures with distinctive red hair and perhaps other unique physical characteristics like 6 fingers, as mentioned in the story. 2. Primitive settlements. The giants might have primitive settlements or dwellings scattered throughout the valley, consisting of crude structures made from stone, wood, or other natural materials. These settlements could provide insights into the giants' lifestyle and culture. 3. Ancient artifacts. Within the giants' settlements or scattered across the valley, there could be various artifacts such as tools, weapons, pottery, or artwork, offering clues about their technology, craftsmanship, and artistic expression. 4. Natural resources. The valley might be rich in natural resources that the giants rely on for survival, such as fertile soil for agriculture, abundant water sources like rivers or springs, and diverse flora and fauna for food and other purposes. 5. Mysterious landmarks. The valley could feature mysterious landmarks or structures that hold significance to the giant's mythology or history, such as ancient monuments, sacred sites, or natural formations with cultural significance. 6. Dangerous wildlife. In addition to the giants themselves, the valley might be home to dangerous wildlife adapted to the giant's presence, such as oversized predators or creatures with unique adaptations to survive in the giant's environment. 7. Caves and underground passages. The valley could contain extensive cave systems or underground passages that the giants use for shelter, storage, or ritual purposes, adding an element of mystery and exploration to the setting. 8. Cultural practices. Observing the giants' cultural practices, rituals, and traditions could provide further insight into their society and beliefs, including any interactions with other beings or supernatural entities. The Major said, "I'd better inform the others that we left the cave system and to keep 30-minute radio contact. It's too soon to bring 50 men out. Their presence could start panic." Chase just nodded in agreement. Further down the trail they found a wide stream with a rather large fish swimming by. "I'm thinking land of the giants," Chase commented. "You would need a 50 calories to catch that fish," Dalton replied. "What else here is gigantic?" "Odd," Chase continued, "in the most uncivilized and backwards places in the world, one would find a giant. The Middle East has hardly changed since the dawn of man. The people are little more than cavemen and yet their oil gives them tools that they only know how to kill with." Chase nodded. "Like all countries the U.S. interfere with, we will leave, and Afghanistan will return to the way it was. All our people will have lost their lives for nothing. Hopefully, finding the child will give some explanation to the loss of the private that died from a spear through his chest." The two men heard movement in the bushes just to the other side of the water. They backed up and squatted down. A very large Asiatic black bear lumbered up to the water and took a drink. It then raised its nose because it smelled the two men crouching in the bushes. The bear was the size of a Kodiak bear, the largest of the brown bear family. The two men pulled out their tranquilizer guns and readied for an attack. The bear took more water and turned its large head and walked away. Both men gave a sigh of relief. They knew they were lucky that time and wondered what else there might be out here. Chase and Dalton followed the stream in the opposite direction the bear took. They saw a few more large fish, a sturgeon, some trout and a few snakeheads, all larger than usual. There were also a few almond and pomegranate trees hanging over the water. Chase thought that the giant must have gotten tired of eating fish, fruit and nuts and acquired a taste for people. Scientists back in the States determined the red-haired giant man-thing had 50 chromosomes, which is 4 more than humans have, and triple DNA helix, rather than the double helix in most all other life on the planet. This doesn't explain the unusually sized animals in this valley, or the tree fruit, but there are still many mysteries yet to come. For example, they saw a couple very large freshwater otters, the size of German shepherds, a markhor, a goat species with very large, corkscrew-shaped horns, and a very strange cat that looked like it was from the fairy tale, Alice in Wonderland. Then they came across the giant footprints of what looked like someone wearing sandals and another barefoot with 6 toes. "There be giants in this land," said Chase in a pirate voice. "I think the phase is, there be dragons," responded Dalton. "That wouldn't surprise me if there were," smirked Chase. Along the cave side of the mountain was a chalky white cliff. At the foot of the cliff the land gradually turned green. The further away the greener it became. The two men took pictures of everything. Chase wished they carried out his giant child and took pictures of him too. However, once the higher-ups learned of the child people thing, they wanted it. The large child woke up on the helicopter on the ride to the base camp. The helicopter crew tried to sedate him, but the kid thrashed around so hard that it caused the chopper to become too unbalanced to fly. The pilot made an emergency landing, 50 miles from the cave entrance on a field of small flat rocks that flew upwards like projectiles. The crew tried to subdue the child, but he was stronger than the 4-man team. They didn't have tranquilizer guns like the special op team, just syringes. After a couple of injections, the child relaxed and went unconscious. Now the crew had a new problem. Some of the small rocks that flew up and embedded themselves in the motor of the helicopter and can't get enough throttle to lift. What is worse is they are in an exposed location in Taliban country. Richie, the chopper pilot, put in a distress call while two other men tried to find the issue with the motor, and the fourth man tended to the giant kid. It didn't take long before Afghans were spotted on the hilltop, and another 30 minutes before the Taliban appeared. The crew had no choice but to remove the giant kid and place him on the ground, lift off under fire and quickly fly away. Meanwhile, they left the kid asleep on the ground to be captured by the Taliban. The chopper crew called in for another helicopter to retrieve the kid, but it wasn't likely they could make it there before the Taliban came on the scene. Meanwhile, the first chopper team headed back to camp before their helicopter fell out of the sky. Chase and Major Dalton was out of range of any radio signals, so they had no idea of the giant child's fate, and it was anyone's guess what would happen to him. Dalton looked at his watch and suggested they go back, so the two began making their way to the cave opening in which they came there from. The way back from anywhere seems faster than the way to a place, but following their own path, it seemed to be taking forever to get back. So long that they thought they might be lost. Both men studied such things and never got lost in the past. Chase was even a Boy Scout, but the way back seemed to stretch on forever. "Hold up," said Chase as he sat on an old fallen tree and held his canteen up as if he was going to drink. Dalton stood in front of Chase, but Chase was staring past him into a field in the distance. Dalton turned to see a herd of woolly mammoths grazing. "But," was all Dalton said. "You don't think someone popped the top to another gas container?" Chase asked. "Maybe." He paused. "What do you think the chances are? I mean, if somehow this area on the other side of the caverns never was exposed to the same viruses and or bacteria or even pollen the rest of the world has. Maybe this can account for the enormous size of these creatures." Chase replied, "So those contaminates never made it through the caves or over the mountains? Or even in the reverse order? That could be one explanation. Or this place could be a sci-fi storage facility for Earth's life." The two men smiled. Then the both looked up to the twisting of starlings in the air. "This place is too beautiful to turn over to the government," commented Chase. "We should seal it up?" Major Dalton nodded. "That is, if we can find it again. Or this place could be a sci-fi storage facility for Earth's life." The two men smiled. Then they both looked up to the twisting of starlings in the air. "This place is too beautiful to turn over to the government," commented Chase. "We should seal it up?" Major Dalton nodded. "That is, if we can find a way back to the entrance."
This is the end of Chapter 4.